Hello, I'm Tom Rothman of 20th Century Fox. Welcome to Fox Legacy. We're happy to have you with us.
For the past 2 years, we have lived in fear. Now we can live in hope.
Usually here on Fox Legacy, we have a breezy time waltzing through the film classics because, after all, and this is a firm belief of mine, movies are usually fun and meant to be escapist. Tonight's movie, however, requires a more sobering approach because although films have a wondrous power to entertain, they are also, like all great art forms, powerful mirrors of our own world. And as our world is filled with life and death, comedy and tragedy, so too are our films. And when that world is turned upside down, the challenge for all artists is to document events in such a way that future generations will not just see them, but understand them. There are many films over the last 65 years that have explored the most horrifying tragedy in modern times, the Holocaust. 11 million people murdered is such an overwhelming number that it's difficult to comprehend. Documentaries like Alain René's harrowing Night and Fog can show us how it was, but narrative movies can often show us how it feels. The Pawnbroker, Sophie's Choice, Life is Beautiful, The Pianist, Judgment at Nuremberg, Spielberg's masterful Schindler's List, and the movie you are about to see, The Diary of Anne Frank. Anne Frank is powerful storytelling, in part because the filmmakers took great pains to capture true events in a realistic fashion, and in part because we see and experience history through the eyes of a wonderful, imaginative, charming young girl. Anne puts a face and a heart and a soul to the tragedy. Anne Frank lived in Germany with her parents, Otto and Edith, and her sister Margot. Once the Nazis came to power in 1933 and persecution against the Jews began, the family moved to the Netherlands for safety. Sadly, once the Nazis invaded the Netherlands in 1940, the ugly face of persecution came with them. Jews were sent to concentration camps, and the Franks were no longer safe. They hid in an annex of a building owned by Otto Frank's company, along with the Van Pels family, and were aided by Otto's employees. And they lived there, unable to step outside into the sunshine or the darkness for 2 long years. Now, imagine that for a child.
I'm going downstairs.
No.
But there's nobody down there now.
Doesn't matter. I don't ever want you to go beyond that door.
Never?
Never. I'm sorry, Anna. It isn't safe.
Despite these dire circumstances, Anne Frank had the soul of an artist. She chronicled her experiences in her diary, not only for personal relief, but also with the intention of one day publishing her diary so that the world could understand her plight. She started the diary at age 13, before they were forced to hide in the annex, writing to an imaginary friend named Kitty. She continued to write down her thoughts and feelings until August 1st, 1944, when she wrote her final diary entry 3 days before the family's discovery and arrest. The war in Europe ended May 7th, 1945. Miep Gies, a Dutch woman who helped hide Anne and her family, found her papers after the family was arrested and saved them in a drawer, hoping for Anne's safe return. In 1945, when they learned that Anne had perished in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, she gave the papers to Anne's father and sole survivor of the family, Otto Frank. It took him a very long time before he could read his daughter's writing, and after much reflection, he decided to honor Anne's wishes and publish her writings. Her diary was published, first in Dutch in 1947, and subsequently other languages. But it did not become well known until 1955, when husband and wife writing team Frances Goodrich and Albert Hackett adapted Anne's diary for Broadway. The result won the Tony Award for Best Play and the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. It ran for over 700 performances and has been staged countless times around the world, including an acclaimed revival in 1997 with Natalie Portman as Anne. For the 1959 film version, which you'll see tonight, legendary director George Stevens was handed the reins. 5-time Oscar nominee and winner for directing A Place in the Sun and Giant. Stevens had a very personal connection to the material. You see, he himself was a lieutenant colonel in the Army Signal Corps during the war, where he filmed the liberation of Europe. He and his unit were the first Allied soldiers to enter the Dachau concentration camp. His son, George Stevens Jr., said it was the defining event of his father's life. That experience, that first-hand understanding of the tragedy that befell Anne Frank and her family, her friends, and millions more, no doubt filled Stevens with a unique insight that he infused into his storytelling. He knew the horrors that the characters would face and the threat that haunted them every moment they were hidden in the secret annex. During pre-production, Stevens traveled to Amsterdam and met with Otto Frank. He walked up the very stairs leading to the famous hiding place. He needed to experience it for himself and go through that process of asking what happened the day they were discovered. He learned how the soldiers rummaged around looking for jewelry and silverware, and a little plaid diary fell out of the bag and was kicked away. Ironically, the soldiers left behind the most valuable thing of all, proof that the power of art outlasts greed, racism, and even genocide. Normally in film adaptations of plays, the filmmakers find ways to open a story up to more locations or make it feel bigger than the stage version. But after much debate, Stevens chose to keep things tight. He decided that accuracy and authenticity would be much more powerful than epic visuals. And, after all, confinement is the dominant dynamic in the story. Stevens created a set that used the original blueprints from the house, including a 3-level structure, which was very unique for movie sets in those days. Set design and decoration made it feel extremely claustrophobic. He did have his son shoot exterior shots on location in Amsterdam, but that was just part of the plan to recreate Anne's experiences as faithfully as possible. It was very important to Stevens that his cast also felt that sense of realism. Shelley Winters, who plays Mrs. Van Dam in the film, says that Stevens made the set so real that it was almost unbearable for her. He would surprise the actors with sounds of sirens and explosions. Winter scenes, he kept the air conditioning blaring, and for summer scenes, he turned up the heat to blistering degrees. Careful realism was extended to, most importantly, the diary itself. What you will see on film are actually 7 very exact replicas fashioned after an original, which was sent briefly to the studio to help with authenticity. You know, Stevens initially wanted Audrey Hepburn to play the role of Anne. Hepburn had grown up in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation and would have had also a unique understanding of the time and place. But by that time, she was in her 20s and past the point of believably portraying a 13-year-old. So newcomer Millie Perkins, in many ways the spitting image of a younger Hepburn, won the role, beating out thousands of candidates in a worldwide casting call after she was discovered by a Fox executive in a restaurant. A model, Perkins was in Paris on assignment when she was summoned to Hollywood for her screen test. Ironically, she had to give away tickets to see the play version of The Diary of Anne Frank in a Paris theater before she hopped on the plane, and she never did see the play before getting the part. But, as you can see in her screen test, which I'm going to show you now, Perkins had both the innocence and the youthful intelligence that the part needed. Roll test, please.
Okay. Tell me, Millie, what line are you in?
I'm a model, and as a matter of fact, that's why I was late today.
What were you doing?
I was working for 17. I was doing a cover.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah? You're a pretty busy girl, aren't you?
Yes. The reason I couldn't put off the appointment is because I'm going to London next week.
Is that
Saturday.
Right? What are you going to there, London for?
I'm working for a week for a British magazine over there.
Well, that ought to be fun.
Oh, I'm excited. It's my first time.
I have a wonderful feeling that Peter and I now share a secret. If he looks at me, it's just as if a little light goes on inside.
For his part, Otto Frank could not bring himself to watch the play or the movie, the events being too painful to relive. And as a father, I cannot imagine him watching it either. But tonight, you will see that physical boundaries are not necessarily the boundaries of the mind or the heart. As Otto Frank tells his daughter in the film, quote, "Always remember this, Anna. There are no walls, no bolts, no locks that anyone can put on your mind." That is the true gift of life, of Anne's diary, and of the human spirit. I'll see you after the film. Anne Frank and her sister Margot nearly survived Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, but both tragically died of typhus just a few weeks before the camp was liberated by British troops. Director George Stevens considered ending the movie in the camp, but ultimately he realized that Anne's own story should end where her diary ends. So instead, the movie is bookended with sole survivor Otto Frank returning home and being handed the diary. In 1960, the annex was turned into a museum, and if you visit Amsterdam today, you can walk through the very room where Anne and her family and friends were hiding. You can also see Shelley Winter's Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, which she donated to the museum. Anne Frank once pasted a photo of herself in her diary and wrote, "This is a photo as I should wish myself to look all the time. Then maybe I would have a chance to come to Hollywood." It's remarkable to see how self-aware she was and, like most other kids her age, had dreams of making it to Hollywood. The magic, the power, the promise of that word, Hollywood, penetrates all the way to behind those walls. I try to remember that about this joint on days when I'm feeling disillusioned. You see, in a very real sense, of course, Anne made it to Hollywood, although not in the way that any of us could have ever wanted. But out of tragedy comes enlightenment, and her all too brief life teaches us more about the world than most who live to 90. Anne's bravery and artistry have inspired generations. I well remember my own daughter's tears reading the book. Imagine if Anne had been given the chance to have a career as a writer. Who knows? She may well have won an Oscar herself. Anne Frank wrote the following in her diary on April 5th, 1944. She wrote, "I want to go on living even after my death, and that's why I'm so grateful to God for having given me this gift, which I can use to develop myself and to express all that's inside me. When I write, I can shake off all my cares," she wrote. "My sorrow disappears, my spirits are revived. But, and that's a big question, will I ever be able to write something great? Will I ever become a journalist or a writer? I hope so. Oh, I hope so very much." Well, yes, Anne, you will and you did, and we will never forget.
Jan Pampa im Wienerwald, wenn's Frühling wird.
I'm Tom Rothman. We'll see you next time on Fox Legacy.